A black maid forced to marry a paralyzed mafia boss, until her kiss made him stand for love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. She was forced to marry a man the world feared. But what her kiss awakened, no one expected. The dim glow of candlelight flickered through the private library of the Moretti mansion. Shadows danced across leather-bound books and velvet curtains drawn tight against the night. Armed guards stood like statues along the walls, their guns hidden but ready. This was no wedding. This was a sentencing. Zaria Cole's hands trembled at her sides. Her maid's uniform felt like a mark of shame against her deep brown skin. Her braids, usually neat and proud, now felt heavy on her head. Across the room sat Lucien Moretti, the man she had been ordered to marry. 34 years old, head of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast, and bound to a wheelchair since the ambush that killed his first wife and shattered his spine. His tailored black suit could not hide the stillness of his legs. Tattoos crawled up his neck and along his jaw, each one a story written in violence. His eyes burned with cold fury as they met hers. The priest rushed through the vows, voice shaking. Somewhere in the shadows, a gun clicked. A reminder. "I do," Zaria whispered. The ceremony ended without applause. No rice thrown. No cheers. Just the sound of Lucien's wheelchair rolling across marble floors as his guards escorted them through the mansion's endless corridors. Zaria followed in silence, her new ring cold against her finger. A band of platinum and diamonds worth more than her mother's house. It felt like a shackle wrapped in beauty. They stopped before a set of towering oak doors. Lucien's personal quarters. A guard pushed them open, revealing a room larger than her entire childhood apartment. Dark wood furniture. A fireplace crackling low. Windows that overlooked the city like a king surveying his kingdom. "Leave us," Lucien commanded. The guards vanished. The doors closed with a heavy thud. Zaria stood frozen near the entrance, unsure whether to breathe. Lucien wheeled himself toward the fireplace, his back to her. For a long moment, only the crackle of flames filled the silence. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice low and sharp as a blade. "You are my wife in name only. A signature on paper. Nothing more." Zaria swallowed. "I understand. Do you?" He turned his chair to face her, and the firelight caught the ink on his neck, the scars half hidden beneath his collar. "You will attend events when required. You will smile when told. You will be my hands when I cannot reach. But you will never be my heart. I have no use for one." His words were designed to wound. She could hear it in the precision of each syllable. He wanted her to flinch. To cry. To beg for release. She did none of those things. "Is that all?" she asked quietly. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or irritation that his cruelty had not landed as intended. "You will sleep in the adjoining room," he continued, gesturing toward a door on the far wall. "You will not enter my space without permission. You will not speak to my men. You will not ask questions about my business. And you will never," he paused, jaw tightening. "You will never pity me." Zaria looked at him then. Really looked. Past the tattoos that told stories of violence. Past the tailored suit that spoke of power. Past the wheelchair that confined him. She saw a man gripping the armrests so hard his knuckles had gone white. A man whose legs lay motionless but whose eyes screamed with the need to stand. A man who had built walls so high that even he could not see over them anymore. He was not just her captor. He was his own prisoner. "I do not pity you," she said softly. "Pity is for those who have given up." His eyes narrowed. The fire crackled between them. "Get out of my sight," he growled. She turned and walked toward the adjoining room. But at the door, she paused and glanced back. "Good night, Lucien." He did not respond. But as she closed the door behind her, she heard his breath catch. Just for a moment. Just enough to know that somewhere beneath all that armor, the man was still alive. And that terrified him more than anything. 3 nurses quit in the first week. The fourth lasted 2 days before Lucien hurled a glass at the wall and told her to get out before he had her removed permanently. By the end of the second week, the household staff whispered that no one could handle him. That the Don would rot in his chair before accepting help from anyone. That was when the consigliere came to Zarya. "You are his wife," Marco said, his silver hair slicked back, his eyes cold as coins. "You will care for him. It is your duty now." Zarya wanted to refuse. But refusal was not an option in this house. So the next morning, she entered Lucien's quarters with a basin of warm water, fresh towels, and a straight razor. He was by the window, staring at the city below. He did not turn when she entered. "The nurses are gone," she said quietly. "I will be handling your care from now on." His jaw tightened. "I do not need care. Your face says otherwise." She gestured to the stubble darkening his jaw, nearly a beard now. Unkempt. Neglected. A man who had stopped seeing the point in appearances. Lucien finally turned his chair to face her. His eyes were hard, daring her to flinch. She did not. "You think you can handle this?" he asked, voice dangerously low. "I think you have no choice." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Then, without a word, he wheeled himself toward the basin. Zarya worked in silence. She lathered the soap with steady hands, tilted his chin up with her fingers, and brought the razor to his throat. One wrong move and she could end him. They both knew it. But her hands did not waver. She shaved in slow, careful strokes, the blade gliding against his skin. His breath was shallow. His eyes never left her face. When she wiped the remaining soap away with a warm cloth, her fingertips brushed his jaw. He inhaled sharply. Almost imperceptibly. But she noticed. The next morning, she buttoned his shirt. Her fingers worked each button while he sat rigid, refusing to look at her. But she felt his pulse quicken beneath her knuckles when she smoothed the collar against his neck. The third morning, the physical therapist left instructions for leg massage to prevent atrophy. Zarya knelt before his chair, her hands pressing into the muscles that no longer responded. His legs were still beneath her palms. Lifeless. But his grip on the armrest told a different story. "Stop," he said through clenched teeth. "I am not finished." I said stop. She looked up and found his eyes burning. Not with anger. With something far more dangerous. Want. He hated her for it. She could see the war raging behind his gaze. The craving for her touch battling against his pride. She released his leg and stood slowly. "Same time tomorrow," she said. She left him alone with the fire and his torment. But she felt his eyes on her back long after the door closed. The home gym smelled of sweat and defeat. Lucien gripped the parallel bars, his arms trembling with effort. His physical therapist had left an hour ago, but he refused to stop. He never stopped. Every night, long after the mansion fell silent, he came here to wage war against his own body. Zarya watched from the doorway. She had learned his rhythms by now. The rage that drove him. The pride that broke him. His arms gave out. He crashed onto the mat with a grunt of pain and frustration, his wheelchair sitting empty beside him like a throne he despised. "Get out," he snarled without looking up. She did not move. "I said get out." Instead, Zarya walked across the gym and lowered herself onto the mat beside him. She sat with her legs crossed, her maid's uniform wrinkled from the long day, her braids falling over her shoulder. Lucien finally turned his head, fury blazing in his eyes. "Are you deaf? I do not want you here. I heard you. Then why are you still sitting there? Because you need someone to stay." His laugh was bitter, jagged. "I do not need anything from you. I do not need anything from anyone." Zarya looked at him. At the veins straining in his neck. At the sweat soaking through his shirt. At the legs that lay motionless no matter how hard he fought. "You keep punishing yourself," she said quietly. "Every night, you come here and tear yourself apart. But you are fighting the wrong enemy. And what would you know about enemies? I know that the chair is not your enemy, Lucien." She held his gaze, unflinching. "You are not the chair." The words landed somewhere deep. She saw it in the way his breath hitched. In the way his jaw tightened against something that was not anger. "You think pretty words will fix me?" His voice cracked despite his effort to keep it hard. "Nothing fixes this. Nothing." Zarya leaned forward. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her hand against his chest. Right over his heart. "This is not broken," she whispered. "This still beats. This still fights. Stop trying to escape the chair and start remembering the man who sits in it." Lucien stared at her. His pulse hammered against her palm. The gym fell silent except for his ragged breathing. And then it happened. A jolt. A flicker of electricity shooting down his spine, spreading through his hips, crackling faintly into his thighs. His eyes widened. His hand shot out and gripped her wrist. "What?" He could barely speak. "What was that?" Zarya did not pull away. "What did you feel?" He looked down at his legs as if seeing them for the first time. The sensation was already fading, ghost-like and fleeting. But it had been real. When his eyes returned to hers, something had shifted. The fury was gone. In its place was something raw. Vulnerable. Terrified. Hope. "You," he breathed. "It is you." The private dining room of Ristorante Vecchio had hosted generations of blood oaths, betrayals, and treaties sealed over wine and whispered threats. Tonight, it would host a test. Zarya sat beside Lucien at the head of the long table, her posture straight, her expression calm. She wore a black dress the household staff had chosen for her. Simple. Elegant. The kind of gown that whispered power rather than screamed it. Across from them sat Victor Castellano, head of a rival syndicate that had been circling Moretti territory like vultures since the ambush. His men flanked him, their smirks barely concealed. They had come to sniff out weakness. They found it the moment Lucien wheeled into the room. "Lucien," Victor said, swirling his wine with theatrical amusement. "I must say, I was surprised you accepted my invitation. I thought perhaps you had retired." The insult landed softly, wrapped in silk. Lucien's jaw tightened but he said nothing. Dinner proceeded with poisoned pleasantries. Business was discussed in coded language. Zarya listened, absorbing everything while appearing to notice nothing. She had learned quickly that in this world, silence was a weapon. Then Victor leaned back in his chair and let the mask slip. "Tell me, Lucien," he said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "How does it feel to be half the man you used to be?" The room went cold. Lucien's hand moved beneath the table, reaching for the gun holstered at his side. But his fingers trembled. The angle was wrong. His body betrayed him at the worst possible moment. Victor saw. His smile widened like a knife wound. Before Lucien could struggle further, Zarya placed her hand over his. Gently. Firmly. She felt the tension coiled in his muscles, the humiliation burning through him. Then she turned to Victor. Half a man, she repeated, her voice soft but carrying across the silence like a blade through water. That is an interesting measurement, Mr. Castellano. Tell me, how do you measure a man? By the legs he stands on? Or by the empire he built while men like you were still begging for scraps at your father's table? Victor's smile faltered. Zarya continued, her gaze unwavering. My husband took a bullet that would have killed anyone else. He buried his enemies while learning to breathe again. He rebuilt what others tried to destroy. And he did it all from that chair. She tilted her head slightly. What have you built, Mr. Castellano? Besides the courage to insult a man who could end your bloodline with a single phone call. The room was suffocating in its silence. Victor's face reddened. His men shifted uncomfortably. No one dared speak. Zarya lifted her wine glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. Now. Shall we discuss business like civilized people? Or do you have more questions about my husband's legs? Victor said nothing for the rest of the evening. When they returned to the car, Lucien looked at her with eyes she had never seen before. Where, he said quietly, did you come from? Zarya met his gaze. The same place you forgot existed. The place where survival teaches you to fight with whatever you have. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since their wedding, he smiled. Something changed after the dinner with Castellano. Lucien no longer looked at Zarya like she was an inconvenience he had been forced to tolerate. He looked at her like she was a mystery he needed to solve. A fire he could not stop reaching toward even though he knew it would burn. And he began to train in secret. Zarya discovered it by accident. She woke one night to a sound echoing faintly through the mansion. Following it through the dark corridors, she found the gym lights on at 3 in the morning. Through the crack in the door, she watched him. Lucien gripped the parallel bars, his arms shaking violently. Sweat poured down his face. His legs trembled beneath him, barely responding, but he refused to stop. He took one agonizing step. Then another. Then collapsed onto the mat with a muffled grunt. He lay there for a moment, chest heaving. Then he dragged himself back up and started again. She did not let him know she had seen. But every night after that, she listened for the sound of his war. And every morning, she pretended not to notice the exhaustion in his eyes. Weeks passed. The tension between them grew thicker, heavier, until even being in the same room felt like standing too close to a flame. One night, Zarya found him in the study, staring into the fireplace. A glass of whiskey sat untouched in his hand. She hesitated at the door, but he spoke without turning. Sit with me. It was not a command. It was a request. Perhaps the first he had ever made of her. She sat in the chair across from him. The fire crackled between them, casting shadows across his face, softening the sharp edges she had come to know so well. I hated you, he said quietly. Zarya did not flinch. I know. Not because of what you did. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were raw in a way she had never seen. Because of what you saw. You saw me at my lowest. Broken. Pathetic. I wanted to destroy you for it. And now. He set the glass down and wheeled closer. Close enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his dark eyes. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Now I only want you to see me strong. His voice dropped low, rough with something that made her pulse quicken. I want to be the man you defended. The man you believe still exists beneath all this wreckage. Zarya's breath caught. Lucien. He reached out and cupped her face with his hand. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle despite the calluses, despite the violence those hands had committed. "I want you," he whispered. "More than I have wanted anything since before the chair." She leaned into his touch, her heart pounding. His lips hovered inches from hers. The fire crackled. The world outside disappeared. Then he pulled back. "Not yet," he breathed, his forehead resting against hers. "Not until I can stand to hold you. Not until I can be the man you deserve." Zarya closed her eyes, aching with the weight of his promise. "Then stand, Lucien," she whispered. "I will be waiting." The happiness lasted exactly 17 days. Zarya had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the walls between them were finally crumbling. Lucien smiled more. He touched her hand during meals. He looked at her like she was something precious rather than something purchased. Then his aunt arrived. Donna Moretti was a woman carved from ice and old money. She had run the family's affairs during Lucien's recovery, and she had made it clear from the beginning that she considered Zarya an insult to the Moretti name. A maid. A nobody. A stain on their legacy. She came to dinner that evening with a folder tucked under her arm and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Nephew," she said, kissing both his cheeks. "You look stronger. The physical therapy must be working." Lucien nodded, his expression guarded. He had never trusted her. But blood was blood in this family, and she had power he could not ignore. Donna waited until the main course was served before she struck. "I have something you need to see." She slid the folder across the table toward Lucien. "Regarding your wife." Zarya's blood went cold. Lucien opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Grainy but clear enough. Zarya standing on a street corner, handing an envelope to a young man. Her brother, Malik. The timestamp was from 2 weeks before the wedding. "That man," Donna said smoothly, "owes $60,000 to the Castellano family." "Interesting, no? That your bride was meeting with someone indebted to your rivals just before she conveniently became untouchable as your wife." The room fell silent. Lucien stared at the photos. His jaw was tight. His knuckles white against the table's edge. "Lucien," Zarya started. "Is this true?" His voice was quiet. "Dangerously so." "The debt is true. Malik made mistakes. He got involved with the wrong people." She forced herself to hold his gaze even as her heart cracked. "I was giving him money to help pay it off. That is all. I swear to you." "And the timing?" Donna pressed, leaning forward with poisonous delight. "Right before you were bound to this family. How convenient. I did not know about the marriage then. I did not know about any of this." Zarya's voice trembled despite her effort to stay steady. "I am not a spy, Lucien. I would never betray you." Lucien said nothing. He simply looked at her with those dark eyes that had once burned with desire. Now they were shuttered. Distant. Doubt. She saw it clearly, and it shattered something inside her. "I have told you the truth," she whispered. "Whether you believe me is your choice." She rose from the table and walked out of the dining room with her head held high. She would not cry in front of that woman. She would not give Donna the satisfaction. But once she reached her room, she pressed her back against the door and let the tears fall silently. Trust, it seemed, was still a fortress she had not yet breached. Zarya packed in silence. She did not take the jewelry. She did not take the designer clothes that had been bought for her. She folded her original maid's uniform into her small suitcase along with the few personal items she had brought into this gilded prison. Outside her window, rain began to fall. The same rain that had drummed against the chapel windows the night she became Lucien Moretti's wife. She had spent the last 2 days waiting for him to come to her. To tell her he believed her. To tell her that Donna's poison had not seeped into his heart. He never came. She heard from the staff that the family council had convened. That whispers of a spy in the Don's bed had spread through the organization like wildfire. That Lucien's authority was being questioned for the first time since the ambush. If he kept her, he looked weak. Compromised. A man led by desire rather than duty. If he cast her out, he looked decisive. Strong. A leader who would not tolerate betrayal, even from his own wife. Zarya understood the calculus. She had grown up with nothing, but she was not stupid. She knew how power worked. How perception was everything in a world built on fear and respect. She also knew that staying would destroy him. So she made the choice he could not. She sat at the small writing desk in her room and pulled out a piece of stationery. The pen trembled in her hand, but her words did not. Lucien. By the time you read this, I will be gone. I am not leaving because I am guilty. I am leaving because my presence makes you look weak, and I will not be the reason your empire crumbles. You have fought too hard to stand again. I will not let them use me to push you back down. You do not need a nurse anymore, Lucien. You need a queen. And I cannot be that until you trust me. If what we had was real, it will survive this. If it was not, then at least I gave you back your legs and you gave me back my courage. Stand tall, Lucien. Not for me. For yourself. Zarya. She folded the letter and placed it on his pillow. The same pillow she had never been allowed to share. Then she slipped out through the servants' entrance, the same door she had used every day when she was just the help. The guards did not stop her. Why would they? She was nobody again. The rain soaked through her coat as she walked down the long driveway, her suitcase wheels scraping against the wet gravel. She did not look back. Behind her, the Moretti mansion glowed like a golden tomb against the dark sky. And somewhere inside, a man who was learning to walk again would wake to find the only person who believed in him had vanished into the night. The mansion had never been so quiet. Lucien sat in his study, the letter crumpled in his fist. He had read it 17 times. Each word carved deeper than the last. You do not need a nurse anymore, Lucien. You need a queen. He hurled his whiskey glass against the wall. It shattered, amber liquid streaking down the wallpaper like tears. But the silence swallowed even that violence, leaving nothing but emptiness. 3 days passed. He did not eat. He barely slept. His men tiptoed around him like he was a bomb waiting to detonate. Donna visited once, triumphant in her victory. It is better this way, nephew. She was beneath you. He told her to get out before he forgot she was family. On the 4th night, he wheeled himself through the empty corridors. Past the dining room where Zarya had defended his honor. Past the library where they had been married. Past her room, now stripped bare of any trace she had existed. He stopped at the gym. The parallel bars stood waiting in the dim light. Silent witnesses to every failure. Every fall. Every moment he had wanted to surrender. Her voice echoed in his memory. You are not the chair, Lucien. He had doubted her. After everything she had done, after every wall she had broken down, he had looked at those photographs and let suspicion poison what they had built. That was not strength. That was his old weakness dressed in new clothes. Lucien locked the wheels of his chair and gripped the bars. His arms screamed as he pulled himself upward. His legs trembled, fighting against months of atrophy. Sweat poured down his face. His vision blurred. He collapsed. The mat caught him like it always did. Cold. Unforgiving. He lay there, gasping, staring at the ceiling. Stand tall, Lucien. Not for me. For yourself. He dragged himself back to the bars. Again. His legs buckled. He fell. Again. His muscles burned like fire. He fell. Again. This time, something held. His knees locked. His spine straightened. He stood there, shaking violently, but upright. 1 second. 2. 3. He took a step. Pain exploded through his body. He gritted his teeth and took another. Then another. By the 5th step, tears streamed down his face. Not from pain. From something far more terrifying. Freedom. He collapsed against the bars, chest heaving, laughing and sobbing at the same time. He had done it. Not for the Empire. Not for revenge. For her. He pulled out his phone and called Marco. Don Moretti? The consigliere's voice was cautious. Find her. Lucien's voice was raw but steady. I do not care what it takes. Find Zarya. And when we locate her. Lucien looked down at his legs. At the body that had finally remembered how to fight. Get the car ready, he said. I am driving. He hung up and stared at the empty gym. Hold on, Zarya. I am coming. 2 months had passed since Zarya vanished into the city. She had found work at a small community hospital in a neighborhood where nobody asked questions. The pay was modest. The hours were long. But for the first time in her life, she was building something that belonged to her. She tried not to think about him. About the mansion. About the way his hand had cupped her face by the firelight. About the promise he had made but never fulfilled. Some nights, she failed. Tonight, her shift ended late. The autumn air was crisp as she pushed through the hospital's back doors, her scrubs wrinkled, her braids tucked beneath a simple head wrap. She was thinking about the warm soup waiting in her tiny apartment when she saw them. 3 black SUVs. Parked in a line. Engines running. Windows tinted dark as midnight. Her blood turned to ice. This was it. Donna had won. They had come to silence the maid who knew too much. Zarya stood frozen on the pavement, heart pounding against her ribs. She thought about running, but her legs would not move. The door of the middle SUV opened. First, a cane emerged. Black wood with a silver handle. It struck the pavement with a sharp click. Then a polished shoe. Italian leather, gleaming under the streetlights. And then he stood. Lucien Moretti rose from the vehicle like a resurrection. Tall. Imposing. His tailored coat hung perfectly from his broad shoulders. The tattoos on his neck disappeared into his collar, dark ink against golden skin. He was standing. Zarya's hand flew to her mouth. Tears blurred her vision before she could stop them. He walked toward her. Each step was a battle. She could see the effort and the tension of his jaw, the white-knuckled grip on his cane. But he did not falter. He did not fall. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Whiskey and sandalwood. The scent of home she had tried so hard to forget. From his pocket, he pulled a folded document. The marriage contract. Her signature next to his, surrounded by clauses and conditions and cold legal language. He held it up. Then he pulled out a lighter and set it ablaze. The paper curled and blackened, carried away by the wind in fragments of ash. I do not want a maid, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I do not want a nurse. He reached out and cupped her face, just as he had that night by the fire. I want my wife. Zarya sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lucien. He kissed her. Deep. Desperate. Full of every word he had never been able to say. And this time, when she melted into him, he held her weight completely. His arms strong around her. His legs steady beneath them both. When they finally pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. I stood for you, he whispered. Now let me spend the rest of my life standing beside you. She smiled through her tears. Then stand with me, Lucien. Not behind me. Not above me. With me. He smiled back. The first real smile she had ever seen from him. Always. And there, beneath the streetlights of a city that had witnessed their fall, two broken souls finally found what they had been searching for all along. Not a contract. Not a cage. But a love strong enough to make a king kneel and a queen rise. Because in the end, love is not about finding someone who completes you. It is about finding someone who inspires you to stand when the whole world expects you to fall. Please subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you never miss another incredible story.